Let's see how to use Node.js as a backend when developing a React application. I'll start by creating a new folder and I'll call it React and Node. And let's enter this folder. And inside this folder, we'll have both our projects, our React application and our Node.js application. Let's start with creating the React application, and to do that, I use create React app. And the new React app was created in the folder Frontend. So let's open the Frontend folder with Visual Studio Code. So inside our source folder, we have our app.js file. We're going to use useState, so let's import it. And let's start by creating an array of names. At the moment, we'll create it right at the front end inside our React app, but later on, we'll fetch it from the backend. And as you can see, I used useState to define this array, so later on, when we will update it using the Node.js server, it will be easier to show the updated values. But of course, we can just display the values in the array on our page. So let's write a new function that will map these values to list items. And I'll simply use map to map each of the values in the array to a new list item. And now that we have the new array of the list items, we can simply return it from the function. And now I'm going to remove almost everything from here, because all I want my React application to do is display these list items in a new list. So let's create a new list. And inside this list, we're simply going to show the list items that we can get from this new function we just wrote. And let's also add h1 for good measure. So let's try to start our React application and see how it looks like. And the React development server was started at port 3000. And here we can see the array of names we defined. Let's now create a new button that will fetch the updated array of names from the backend. And as you can see, we connected the onClick event of this button to the function handleClick, and this is a new function that we'll have to write. And from this new function, we'll call our Node.js server to fetch the updated array of names. So since we're about to use our Node.js server, we'll better create it. And here we have the backend folder open in Visual Studio Code. So first, let's run npm init in this new folder. And let's also install express.js. We can now create the main file of our Node server, and I'll simply call it server.js. And as you can see, the code is very simple. I simply create an instance of Express, and then I create a new array of names that's different than what we had in the front end. And I also created a get route, which can be accessed by users. And what this route returns is the array of names as a JSON object. And finally, we start our Express server by asking it to listen to port 5000. So let's save our code and start our server. And the server is now listening to port 5000. Let's now get back to our front-end React code. And now that we have our server running, we can implement our handleClick function. And as I said, what we're going to do in this function is fetch the updated array of names from the Node server. So as you can see, I'm trying to access the server at the user's route. I then have a then block to extract the fetch response, and then I call res.json to extract the returned object from the JSON we get back. Finally, I call setNames with the actual array that we get back. And notice that setNames is the function that we defined here. So when we call setNames with a new array, the names array will be updated, and this update will be reflected to what we see in the page itself. So let's try to save our React code and get back to the browser. And if we update the page, everything seems to work fine. But when we click on the Update Names button, we see that we got some problem in our fetch. So let's open the developer tools, and we can see that our problem has to do with CORS. Now, CORS stands for Cross-Origin Resource Sharing, and it happened because our browser accessed the server at port 3000. That's the React development server. But this server, in turn, tried to access the server at port 5000, which is the Node server. And generally speaking, when we access a server from our browser, and this server tries to get resources from another server, the browser will block it, because by default, browsers block cross-origin resources. Luckily, when working with React, it's really easy to bypass this problem. So what we need to do is access our package.json file, and here we have to add one new line, this one. What this line is tell the React application that whenever it has to handle some route that's not defined within the React application, it needs to forward the request to the server that we define here. So if the route that's being accessed is handled within the React application, it will be handled normally. But if not, the React application will forward it to the server we define here. So now in our code, instead of explicitly specifying the server we want to access, we can simply write the route. And since the route users is not handled anywhere in our React application, it will be forwarded to the Node server. Now, since we made changes to our package.json file, we have to restart our React development server. And here we see the updated React application. And right now, here we see the values that were defined inside the React application. But when we click on the button, it fetches the updated values from the Node.js server and displays them